Hi there, and welcome to KSC Online, Episode 6 of our podcast series. And this is part of our web weekends, and while we're together in this quarantine time, we've been approaching life this way together on the weekends. And so in the next few minutes, we're going to share from devotional thought together and pray together and share some links together. And we're going to take some time to explore a series together over the next few weeks that relates to keeping it simple in these complicated times. So let's jump in. And today, as we dive into this, we want to talk a little bit about how God is for us. And a lot of us have had a number of impressions and pictures of what it means to connect with God, or what we may imagine God being like, whether He's in heaven and kind of looking down on us, or maybe even feeling like He is kind of looking down on us in a critical kind of a way. And so as we explore the fact that God is for us and keeping it simple in these complicated times, one of the thoughts that kind of came back to my mind was the season in our kids' lives where they were learning to ride a bike. And some of those teachable moments that I have discovered about the character of God have happened sometimes in those odd moments. And oddly enough, one kind of came in that whole sequence of teaching our kids how to ride a bike. They all learned on the same bike. It was a little red bike with training wheels, and it had its share of scrapes on the handlebars from some of the tumbles, and we just encouraged them to keep at it. And as you could imagine, some of the same video type footage that you see of parents running behind the bike and holding on to the seat and trying to help them balance, those are videos and those are visuals that were a part of our world, and every single one of them went through that. And as I think about the encouragement that was a part of that time, and as I think about some of the scrapes and the tumbles that were a part of that time, and as I think about how we encourage them to keep at it, and how the truth of that moment when they would kind of stumble, or when they would kind of get a little bit out there, and how excited you were when they started to kind of pedal on their own, and then you remove the training wheels and they're starting to get it, and they come to the place where they're finally able to ride their bike all by themselves. And the joy and the excitement that's a part of that, that was for me as a dad in helping them with that, was just absolutely awesome. And when I think about that, and as I was processing that one day, God really helped me to see that there is a part of His character that really enjoys me in that same way. And I believe God enjoys us as His kids in the same way. As we follow Jesus, what we discover is that God thinks about us in a wonderful and encouraging way. He is for us. Now, for me, when I was growing up, I kind of had this picture that God loved me if I was doing the right things, if I was doing good, or He was kind of waiting, waiting and holding back, maybe just to see if I was gonna mess up, and He would only give me some of the things that I deserved. And what I've discovered about the grace of God and the character of God in the years since, and even in moments like what I just told you about, is that when I think of God in those ways, I'm cheating Him and myself from the kind of relationship that He really longs to have with me, and the way that He longs to continue to engage with me and encourage me and provide in my life. And I discovered that some of those pictures that I had as a kid weren't really the heart of God at all. Yes, we are accountable for our actions, and yes, God is generous beyond what I deserve, and yes, there are creative ways in which He's looking to continue to provide and encourage in my life. But ultimately, it all surrounds a desire for a connection that He has with each of us. Now, the section of the Bible we're looking at today for our devotional is in the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament. And God had put Jeremiah in the position of being responsible to warn the people of Israel that there was something that was going to change, and it was on its way, and it was coming soon. Now, like most times in history, people with a warning like what Jeremiah had were ignored as if they were crazy. And so the people of Israel didn't really pay attention, and then the unimaginable really did happen. Israel is attacked, and then they're dragged off into captivity in a foreign land. And so the shock of this moment is unfolding here in chapter 29 as Jeremiah is writing to them, and he is sharing some thoughts with them about what this new reality was looking like. They were in a new space, and they were trying to figure out how do they deal with life the way it is now. They were trying to settle in, and do they try and get established, or do they hold out and kind of wait for things to go back to the way they used to be? Because the way life was at that point wasn't the way it used to be, and they didn't necessarily like it. It wasn't the way it should be, and it wasn't what they wanted it to be for all time either. Some of the restlessness that I hear people expressing now after 4 or 5 weeks of quarantine is probably some of the same kind of conversation that was happening with the people of Israel as they landed in this space. And in Jeremiah chapter 29, Jeremiah shares with them what God has been saying to him about this season of life. And it's interesting to realize that there's a couple of phrases that are a part of this whole passage that we're pretty familiar with, and some of you may be able to quote them in Jeremiah 29:11. And it talks about how God says, I know the plans I have for you, and plans to prosper you and to make you a blessing. And it's interesting because oftentimes those are quoted at weddings, or they're quoted at graduations, or any kind of event that we want to encourage people. But God's message in the midst of this time was larger than just that one statement. This is a key part of it, but it's important to recognize that God is seeking to encourage and to provide direction in the midst of a very, very challenging time. Jeremiah comes to them and he says, I want you to settle in, and I want you to learn how to live wisely. God is saying through Jeremiah that there are people who are telling you that things are going to be different than the way I'm sharing them with you, and they're just trying to gain popularity, because God warns them this is going to take quite a while. In their case, it was 70 years that they were going to be in captivity. But he says to them, I haven't forgotten you. You are still mine. And that's what he's emphasizing here in chapter 29, verse 11, with that section that is so familiar. I have good plans in store. Look around and see what I'm up to. And if you read through this, you'll hear the heart of God saying, I want to show you what is unfolding in the midst of this time. And even though your time may seem uncertain, I want you to know I'm still at work. I'm at work here, even though in your heart and in your mind, all you'd like to do is get things back to the way things used to be. So don't get uptight about people who are misleading you. I'm going to take care of them. Life has changed, but I want you to know you can trust my love for you. Through Jeremiah, God is reminding the people of Israel that in the midst of this very uncertain time, He is for them. There was a time in our family's life when we lived in North Carolina, and I had finished the ministry role that I was in, and we had sold our home, and we were not yet in the place where we knew exactly what was going to happen next, where we were going to relocate to. Were we going to continue to live in the area in North Carolina? Were we going to find different kind of employment? Was there another ministry role? Were we going to have to relocate out of the area? Just exactly what was going to unfold wasn't completely clear. It was a very uncertain time for us as a family. We'd sold our home, and so the sale of our home was going through on the following Tuesday. So Saturday before that, we had a group of people that were coming to our house, and they were going to help us pack everything up. The previous week, we'd packed a number of things and put them into a storage area we had acquired, but this week we were down to the bare minimum, and these were the beds and some of the essentials. They were going to either be moved to a location that we didn't know where it was, or we were going to put them in storage and we didn't know where we were going to go. We weren't sure. And as late as 9 o'clock on that morning, and people are showing up at the door saying, we're ready to help pack, and they're saying, what do you want us to start packing? We were scratching our heads saying, we don't really know where we're going to put it. We're kind of uncertain. I guess we'll just pack everything, put it in storage, and figure out where we're going to stay. You can imagine the stress and the anxiety that was a part of that for me as a dad, recognizing that our family of 6 was going to be on the street, and we weren't really sure just exactly what was going to happen next, whether we were going to stay in North Carolina, whether we were going to go someplace else, just exactly how it was all going to play out. One of the people who walked in to help us pack came in and sat down with us for a moment and said, I've been talking to a friend of mine. And what unfolded next was one of the most wonderful seasons in our family's life. And our kids to this day still talk about that time in our lives as a way that God encouraged and provided for us in a way that we would have never expected. This friend came in and shared with us that a friend of his anonymously wanted to provide a place for us to stay for the next period of time, rent-free. It provided an option for us to be able to stay in North Carolina, to continue to work at the roles that we had been a part of to that point, and to continue to engage with living life and keeping the kids in a consistent habit pattern and not having to kind of jostle around and stay with family or friends for all of that period of time. And I want you to know, I learned in that time that God wasn't early, and I would have liked him to be a lot earlier with his information about what we were going to do. But he was right on time. And we shifted gears in the way we started packing, started adjusting and changing as we were looking to put some things in this temporary home. You know, when you're waiting and when you're thinking, you know, what's going to happen next and how's this all going to play out, sometimes the questions come, God, what are you doing here? And I'm not really sure if you're paying attention, but I really would like to understand what's going on. Do you know how stressed I feel, God? And in the midst of that moment, we can feel like God is just kind of holding back, and he's teasing us in some way. Holding back and not giving us what it is we may think we need. We'd like to have everything worked out. We'd like to have all of the details laid out before us. But in the midst of that time, what I learned was that God was taking care, he was encouraging, and he was providing, and he was showing me that I could trust him even when I didn't understand the whole picture that was before me. He was saying, it's okay. I'm at work. I love you, and you can trust me. Jeremiah reminds the people of Israel that when life is not ideal, God is there, and he is still working, and he is for us. And we maybe need to be reminded of that when situations in our life are not necessarily ideal, that God is for us. We, as people, we tend to complicate things sometimes, don't we? We, don't keep it quite as simple as what it really can be, and God sometimes becomes something that we continue to complicate, and we complicate our relationship with him, and we complicate our communication with him, and we end up running and doing things and being a part of stuff and fretting and building up all kinds of anxious thoughts in our heads. When God says, I want you to know I'm for you, and I'm with you, and I'm working to encourage and to continue to provide for you. So I just have a couple of questions as we think about what it means to keep things simple. And the questions really are questions that we can ask, and I would encourage you to ask them as you're living out life this week? Is my response to God one that reflects that I believe He's for me? Now, when you're asking yourself those questions, oftentimes it's pretty easy to say, well, yeah, I think so. But let's ask some of these questions as to how we respond and see if that helps us inform how God may want to continue to share Himself with us. First question is, when things go wrong, do I hide from God or do I run to God? When things don't go the way I expect, when I make a mistake, when things don't work out the way I wanted them to, do I hide from God or do I run to God? Adam and Eve are kind of the best example of a situation that they kind of pushed God away, and then instead of running to God and saying, we pushed you away and we were wrong, they said, we want to hide from God and cover this up. And so the question that I have for you is, when things don't go right, when things don't go the way you expect, do you hide from God or do you run to God? Another question that can help us flesh out whether we're living in a way that we understand God is for us is, do I live like I have to achieve God's approval, or do I understand how to thrive in His approval? Do I live like I have to achieve God's approval, or do I understand how to thrive in His approval? This is a big difference, isn't it? Because there are times when we function as if we have to help God understand that He should like us. And the truth of the matter is, He already does. He doesn't just love us, He likes us, and He pursues us, and He longs to engage with us. And so do we live life in a way that we think we've got to kind of impress Him? Or do we live life in a way that our lives are free to enjoy the blessing and the encouragement and the provision that comes from Him? Thirdly, I want to ask you the question to filter and kind of process in your own heart. Do I really think God as being for me? And so as you think about that, this last question is, do I fear what will happen to me, or can I rest and know God is working in me? That can be sometimes challenging, can't it? Because our minds race and they kind of go places really, really quick about all of the disastrous and challenging and catastrophe type situations that we could possibly imagine when things go wrong. And so in the midst of that, what ends up happening is we find ourselves living in fear, in a fear that we're concerned about what will happen to us, rather than resting and knowing God is working in us in the midst of this time. Those are challenging questions, and as we consider them, I'd encourage you to allow your heart to listen to what God wants to say and how He wants to continue to challenge you to understand the beauty of keeping it simple, to understand the beauty of knowing that He is for you. I want to take a few minutes in our time here together in this podcast to pray together. I want to pray for you, and I just want to remind you of the 7-day prayer guide that you'll find on our website. The links that are a part of the description and the notes and all of the different places where you can track those links. They have an opportunity to be able to connect to this little card that is available through our website, and it has a prayer request for each day of the week. And so as you follow through on that, there's an opportunity to pray there one day for leaders and then for healthcare workers and etc. as you kind of work through that. So today in this prayer time, we wanted to take a few minutes to pray specifically for you, as some of us today have been following Jesus for a while, and for those for whom that's been a short time, or for those for whom that's been a long time, some of us have struggled with the image we have of God, that we're not really sure that we understand how God is really for us. And so some other picture of God has really been the prevalent way that we've operated, and God is reaching out to us today to encourage us and to provide for us in the way that he shared with Jeremiah about the people of Israel, and the way he shared in different situations in my own life, and the way he shared in multiple situations in your life too. And so, like Jeremiah and his readers in that day, things are not ideal today, and we want to pray specifically that God will reveal to us and continue to coach us in understanding how to keep it simple by understanding that he is for us. And then I wanted to take a few moments for us to pray for our truck drivers today. And some of those truck drivers are away from family, and also if they come home, they do need to self-isolate for the period of time that is the 14 days, and then they would go back out on the road. So they really are missing their family in the midst of this time. Some of the challenges of the road are present as things have closed, and being able to take care of themselves and their vehicle have really kind of, those rules have changed, and some of the guidelines and places that they can do that may be altered today. And so we want to pray for them. They're key members of the supply chain, so let's take some time to pray for them, not just today, but even through this week. Let me pray for us here in this moment. Jesus, we come to you and we acknowledge our need of you, and in the midst of this day, whatever picture we've had of you, I pray that you would replace it over time and over these days with the reality that you are for us, that you love us, and that you're looking for ways to encourage and provide. In the same way that for me as a dad, I long to encourage and provide for my family, and I long to encourage and provide good things in the lives of my kids. And when I think about that, and when I understand your heart and how much greater it must be when it comes to us as your people, I thank you for helping us to follow you and helping us to re-center our thoughts on the reality of you as our encourager and our provider, that you are for us today. Don't let us ever recover from that reality. And today, as we think about our truck drivers that are out on the roads, there are a number of different kind of concerns for them as they travel, family and stops and care and maintenance of themselves, as well as keeping the supply chain going in the midst of this time. Something we seldom think about, but now we're very aware of, is something that we're grateful for. And we thank you for them. We pray that you'll keep them alert, that you'll encourage them, that you'll give them creative ways to be able to make connections with family, with personal care, with the care for their vehicles, all of the different kinds of dynamics that are a part of their world. We ask that you'd help us to be their encouragers and lift them up in prayer this week. We love you. We thank you for your kindness and your graciousness to us today. In your name I pray. Amen. Well, as we wrap this time up together, I want to remind you of some of the links that you'll find in the YouTube description section. You'll also find those in a little link. If you're watching on YouTube, there is a link that's in this post that gives you an opportunity to go to our Facebook site, and you can find all of the notes from these links are in a separate notes file. And if you click on those, they'll take you right to the different locations that we're sharing here in the next few moments. Also, if you're on our website, you'll find those available there in the banners. It'll say podcast extras, and you can have an opportunity to click there and click directly to the podcast extras for today. Those include some links related to worship. These are songs that we would sing on a weekly basis here in our setting, and so we'd encourage you to listen to those. And as I was reading through and listening to the songs that our worship team had set out for us for this week, I was very encouraged to ask you to consider even taking one of those songs throughout this week and maybe making one of those your Monday song and another one of those your Tuesday song, and etc. throughout the week, because they remind us in such a wonderful way through music that God is for us. And so as you're walking through this week, this can be kind of a cool way to connect in worship throughout the entire week. Also want to mention that you'll find in there an email address, office@kschurch.ca. That email address is where you can access our e-bulletin if you would like to request to receive that on a weekly basis. It comes out on Fridays. Also, would like to share with you about prayer, and if you have a prayer request, you can send it in to that email address and it will reach us there. And it's another way for us to also connect with you if there are some things that you want to share with us that God's doing in your life, and if you're interested in even some Bible reading material going forward. We have booklets that are called Daily Bread. There are some large print and small print editions of those, and if you would like a physical copy of those, then feel free to email us a request for that, and make sure we have the correct address to be able to fire that off to over the course of this week. Also want to mention the links that are to our website that relate to RightNow Media, and there are some series loaded up there on our KSC channel if you're a part of RightNow Media, and that link will explain to you what it is if you'd like to be a part of that. Also, the link to the 7-day prayer guide that we talked about earlier, and the link to our website that shares with you information about e-giving, online giving, and mail-in giving for us as a congregation. Also, you'll find in those links some things related to our kids. Our kids are diving into a new series related to a treasure hunt, and so all of the information is available on our Facebook page related to that, the Cabin Kids Facebook page. And so Valerie will explain that in some video footage that will be shared there. So if you'll link over to that from our resources that are available, the podcast extras, then we'd love to be able to share those with you. The link to the Cabin Kids Facebook page also shares with you some of the daily updates, the daily activities for families in the midst of this time. We're glad to be with you today, and if you're watching us on Facebook or if you're watching us on YouTube, feel free to note something in the comments section or give us a shout out. Feel free to share these videos as you wish, and we want to continue to communicate together and share together throughout this week. And so as you have different things that you'd like to share with us, feel free to share some of those public ones there or private ones in the private messages or the email that we mentioned earlier. We're praying for you, we love you, and we're really glad that we can live in the confidence and the simplicity today, knowing that God is for us. And as we seek to continue to be a part of His activity in the midst of this time, we're praying that God will lead us and direct us and encourage us as we seek to be maybe even responding to what He's doing around us with our friends and neighbors and family members, and continuing to serve the people that God brings our way. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.